Hello and welcome to the Utah Puck Report. I'm Jay Stevens, and once again, we tried to make it so Gary could be here, and something came up, so he's not here. Eventually, we're going to get the whole team back together. Today, Tyson Whiting. You go by? Is it Whiting?
Yeah, Whiting.
Okay. The voice of the Utah Grizzlies. You're the play-by-play announcer. It's funny. So I grew up with two brothers, and one went by Whiting, and one went by Whitting. And I guess that's kind of a common thing with some.
Well, it's almost like if you'd add an extra T, then it'd be Whitting. I mean, obviously, everybody knows a Kyle Whittingham. I mean, it's a very similar name, but obviously he's got two T's in his last name.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I have, on our department, we had a DeJournay. In my fire department, it was DeJournay. He pronounced everything, and then his brother goes by DeJournay. So,
well, everybody always thinks it's weird. The Tampa Bay Rays, the baseball team that's in first place in the American League East, they've got a guy named Brandon Lowe and a guy named Josh Lau. They pronounce their last names differently, even though they're spelled the exact same. One's Lowe and one's Lau.
Yeah, you just never know. I guess it's either up to your dad, or I guess at some point, if it's in the same family, it's up to you how you want to say it.
That's right. Say it however you want to.
So, Tyson, you brought up baseball, and that's is baseball your first love? Is that?
Yeah, probably. I mean, it was the one where realistically, being 5'8", I thought that I'd probably have the best chance of being a player as a baseball player. But then when you realize that, I can't even make my high school team, then that dream kind of goes away pretty quickly. But I'm a huge sports fan, whether it's baseball, basketball, football, hockey. I pretty much like them all except for soccer.
Oh, man, I wish my son was here. My son, he normally helps out with the podcast and takes pictures and posts all the social media stuff. He's a soccer player, played in college and stuff, and I tease him all the time about it. But where are you from?
I'm from around here. I'm from the Kearns area, really.
Okay.
I mean, I was born in Pocatello, and then my family moved when I was 2, and I went to Kearns Junior High, Kearns High School. Kind of grew up, watching the Jazz and the glory days of Stockton and Malone, and right there, the late Golden Eagles, early Grizzlies days. That's kind of what I grew up with.
Did you go to Golden Eagles games?
I went to a couple, but I was pretty young when they moved to Detroit, and then the early Grizzlies days. I mean, I still remember. I probably didn't go to many Grizzlies games, but I do remember that '96 Turner Cup run pretty well. Reading the newspapers every day and seeing the progress, and then eventually when they won the whole thing, I mean, it was a pretty big deal, especially with the crowds that they were able to get at Delta Center back then.
Oh yeah. That's one of the things I want to talk about, too. So you went to games, even just a couple, you went to games at the Delta Center.
Yeah. It was really just a couple, but,
it's... Do you go to the NHL games that are there?
I went to a couple of them. I actually shadowed the LA Kings TV broadcast one time. I think it was the 2019 game when they played Vancouver, and I was actually right behind Jim Fox and Alex Faust and watched them work, and I was working some stats there. It was kind of tough because I didn't really have a table next to me, but it was kind of fun. Actually, kind of weird seeing Alex Faust get let go by the Kings. It looks like they're going to now a radio TV simulcast, but that was a lot of fun. Yeah, I mean, it's not like the Delta Center, what's now going to be the Delta Center again. It's not like it's built for hockey, but right. It's still a fun environment. And
it's hosted hockey, and I think the NHL games are fun there. And it's hosted hockey in the past, and none of us complained. I think we were just grateful that hockey was back, and because we'd lost the Eagles, and now the Grizzlies had come in, and it was AAA hockey again, or AHL, IHL. And I think we were all just grateful to have hockey back, and none of us questioned the seats, really. But now that everybody's talking about there's going to be an NHL team, like, the seats aren't good enough there. There's not enough good seats. And I'm like, there's enough.
It could be kind of like the New York Islanders situation when they originally went to Barclays Center, and it's just like you had the folded seats. I think that was kind of the case in Arizona there when they played at the NBA arena before they ended up moving to Glendale. And it's kind of the folded seats are kind of a weird thing, especially on the ends. But and some of the sight lines there, puck gets in the corner, and you got that overhang that kind of obstructs the view for some of the seats. But it's still. I mean, the thing about that downtown arena is it's absolutely perfect for basketball. It's perfect for some of the other events, but when you're folding seats back to make room for hockey, then it could be a little bit difficult.
Right, it does get kind of weird. But then that's also where that awesome Jumbotron comes into play.
Yeah.
So I even watch it, even just at the Maverick Center, I end up watching a lot of the game on the Jumbotron. Then I'm like, what am I doing? Why Why am I staring up when the game's right here in front of me?
Yeah, that was a big addition this year, putting that right at center ice. And it almost seems like you get a replay, and instead of looking to the side there, you'd be looking straight up, and we're able to see exactly what happened, especially on those close calls. It's either they make the right call or the wrong call, and it was fun to see, actually that video board this year. I think it made a big difference.
Yeah, I think so too. I love the upgrades that they've been doing. So tell me how you got into what you do now. Like, what got your start, and what was like your first step?
I think it was one of those things I always wanted to do. Once I realized that I wasn't good enough to be a pro athlete, I knew that immediately that I wanted to be a broadcaster. I was kind of inspired by guys like Hot Rod Hundley, especially with him doing a simulcast where, it'd be a TV broadcast, but he'd have a radio description to it. And I was always kind of drawn to that. So I knew it was something I always wanted to do. But right out of high school, I went to Salt Lake Community College for a year, and I thought eventually I'd get an internship at a radio station. But then I realized, I didn't have much money. So I went and got a real job for about 3 or 4 years over at Winder Farms, which doesn't exist anymore. So I worked in the warehouse for about 3 or 4 years and just was trying to save up enough money to where when I went to school, I could just pay for it right there and not have to deal with those student loans the rest of my life.
Smart, yeah.
So I went to community college thinking I was just going to be in sports talk radio. That was really my whole goal. It wasn't really play-by-play or, work with a team. I really just wanted to work for a sports talk radio station because I was one of those people. I'd listen from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. I was one of those avid sports talk radio listeners. And so, I went to school for a couple years, eventually got an internship at 1320 KFAN in January of 2013, a Cumulus station. And my whole goal there, when I was an intern, is just to find a way to stay. I got my foot in the door. My whole goal was to just find a way to get a job there and just stay. And I was able to make enough of an impression. I know a lot of random sports trivia and sports history, so I was able to, combine that along with, just working hard with audio editing and things like that. And eventually I was able to stick around as a producer. I ended up producing the afternoon show for about 3 years or so, and even had my own Saturday show that I hosted for 2 years. But, while I was there, the Grizzlies were on that station. They were on 1320 KFAN, and I was the guy back at the studio pressing the buttons to make sure that we'd go to commercial and all that stuff. And, while I was there, I tried to do a good job, and, Adrian Denny was the play-by-play guy at the time, and so I got to know him a little bit, and then I'd run into him at Bees games every now and then. And in January of 2017, he brought me in to do some game night stuff and just kind of help out on game nights. And he must have known the radio station was going to fold or something I didn't know. But on February 27th, 2017, the radio station folded on a snowy Monday. And before you know it, just like, oh, wait a minute, now what am I going to do? Right. I'd been working as a producer, trying to work my way up to a host, and all of a sudden, bam, just like that, the rug just pulled from underneath. And so it's like, okay, well, the only thing I got left is the Grizzlies. So it's actually, we got let go at about 10 a.m. On that Monday. And so for some reason, it's like there's 5 inches of snow on the ground. I figure I got nothing else to do today. So I drive up to Maverick Center, and I figure I'm just going to hang out there for a little bit because what else do I got to do? I don't have work anymore. Right. So, Adrian's like, oh, we'll find something for you to do. We'll find a way to keep you occupied and busy. And like 3 hours later, I'm in an elementary school closet putting on Grisby's costume for a school assembly, thinking to myself, boy, this is not how I thought this Monday would go. Life comes at you fast. Yeah. And so from there, they made me the pre and post game guy, and then in the summer of 2018, I ended up going to the Idaho Falls Chuckers, which is, they were actually owned by the same people who own the Grizzlies. Right. So I did that for a summer, and during that summer, Adrian went to the AHL's Tucson Roadrunners, and all of a sudden, Utah needed a broadcaster, and I figured, well, I just thought that I was going to be the pre and post game guy, so I figured, well, I better put my name in the hat because otherwise I got nothing else lined up. Right. So I put my name in the hat, and for some reason they picked me, and some 5 years later, here we are.
Yeah, I'll tell you, and I didn't say this at the beginning, but I should have. Like, I'm a big fan of yours. Like, I didn't know who you were. I hadn't listened. Like, I love Adrian, and but I didn't listen to him very often either. I think mostly because I was either at the game or if the Grizzlies were on the road, I just didn't usually tune in, which I should have been. I usually just wait for the text saying, hey, so-and-so's sick or so-and-so got pulled up. And then that really involves me again, right? Like if I get to E-Bug. But the first few times I listened to you, I remember, I don't know if you know who Phil Snyder is. He's a local hockey player. He's also in a band. And
isn't he the guy that came up with the Grizzlies goal song?
Yeah, he is. Yeah, his band. And actually they're working on, right now, we talked about it yesterday, they're working on an intro song for like an intro video for when the Grizz come out on the ice. But anyway, I was listening to him. He's like, hey, have you heard the new guy? And I said, no, I haven't. So he fired you up, and I was like, wow. Like Adrian was awesome, and I'm not trying to take anything away from Adrian, but you added a whole new depth. And maybe it's coming from that baseball background, or maybe it's more, I think you just do your homework more than a lot of guys in the East Coast League. So I just got to tell you, I'm really impressed with the way you handle the game. And I think what I was told about you at first is that you weren't a hockey guy. So I'm like, this typically doesn't work out, right? Like a guy that doesn't understand the sport isn't going to be able to really broadcast it. But you obviously understand the sport, and you do an amazing job. So I just pump your tire there for a minute. But
thanks.
Yeah, I just wanted to tell you as a fan at the beginning. I totally forgot. All right, so now you're with the Grizzlies, and now you went from, kind of being a part-time guy. You know, and I've done the same thing that you were doing, the board opping, my entire life. I started radio when I was 12, and then I'd be the board op guy, or even if you're on the other side of it. But it wasn't until like 2 years ago, I'm not even supposed to really admit this, but another radio station during COVID was having problems with staffing, and they said, hey, can you just help us with Weber State football games? Like, will you come in and just board up? Which is weird to ask a guy that's my age, but they were just desperate. It was a friend of mine. I was like, yeah, I'll go in and board up. And you forget about that closeness like you must have been getting with Adrian, because you're on the air, and then you're in the board op's ear the whole time just saying, hey, we're going to go to commercial, or hey, when do I come out? How much time do I have? And you get a lot of communication that way. So it's funny. You kind of really build up that relationship.
Hey, you gotta know when that out cue is. Gonna make sure you hit that commercial. Things like that.
It's easy for you to know in the studio, but you got to make sure that Adrian knows, or whoever else is back. So now that you've been around, and you mentioned like it was on radio, and now it's things change a lot. What do you see happening with Grizzlies broadcasts in the future, like streaming and all that stuff?
Well, I mean, this past year we ended up doing our audio broadcast on YouTube, which was certainly interesting. I don't know that anybody's really done that, but
makes it harder to listen to in the car. But yeah.
It really does. You just fire up the phone and things like that. But it's I can almost see it kind of being, I imagine Flow Sports going to continue with the exclusive video stream, and problem with that is that they're the only ones that can show you a video of the game. So it's just like your audio broadcast, which is kind of a combination of video and audio, because you got a camera watching me while I'm watching the game, which is kind of weird. It took a lot of time to get used to, but I imagine that might be what happens next year. But it almost seems like even NHL teams are experimenting. I mean, just recently the LA Kings went from a separate TV and radio broadcast to just having one. They got rid of Alex Faust, and then they put Nick Nixon there as the play-by-play guide. I imagine he's just going to do a simulcast where it's going to be a TV broadcast, but on the audio side, it's going to be radio description.
Yeah.
And you're seeing some other teams kind of get creative with it as well. And at the NHL level, probably the death of the regional sports networks is going to cause some teams to think about Plan B and what they're going to do with
for sure.
Their TV broadcasts, and do they just combine it with a radio broadcast of some kind. And it's difficult at times, especially with road games, doing a remote broadcasts and watching the video feed, and so it's almost like with road games, it's tough to get really creative when you're just trying to get the basics of see the game and just find a way to get it out to the audience. And so I imagine here for the short term, it's going to be pretty similar to what it was the previous year for the Grizzlies.
What did that start? Like, you not going on road trips, did that start during COVID and then just keep going?
Yeah, it was one of those where that year where only half the teams in the league played. I don't think anybody was traveling. I think Fort Wayne's guy might have drove, because they were so close to a lot of the road games that they went to the road venues. I think he ended up driving to most of the road games, but just about everybody else. And it was a league-wide thing where they just, kept the broadcasters at home. And then, then the following year, it just was kind of a team-by-team thing. Some teams did travel their guys and some teams didn't. And the ones that didn't, Flow Sports would give them a feed, and then you just plug a USB into the computer or something and fire up audio that way, and just
it's kind of a weird. I don't know. I don't love it. I gotta admit that it's got to be tough for you. Like I can't imagine. It's almost like when you would practice. I remember I was asked during that professional roller hockey. There were 3 of us goalies, and they said, "Hey, you've done broadcasting. Is there a chance if you're not either playing or on the bench that you could do play-by-play?" And I'd never done it. And they said, "Well, just watch basketball games on TV and practice, announcing with it." So that's kind of like how you start. And now it feels like because of streaming and budgets or COVID or whatever, now you're kind of back to how you practiced, right? Like you're watching the game on TV just like everybody else, and now you're trying to make it exciting for everybody.
Yeah, especially since you're just in an empty room. It's kind of tough when a goal gets scored. You want to build that excitement, but yet there really isn't much of a background noise, and so it feels like you're in a room by yourself, and so you got to generate a little bit of excitement. Then you hope that the camera operators, do their part. Like in Tulsa, it seems like it goes back and forth so much, and half the time the puck isn't even on the screen.
Right,
so you're trying to find a way to figure out, 1, where the puck is, and 2, who's got it.
Yeah.
I think one of the tough things is, with those video feeds is that, you're only getting that one camera angle, and some of the things that you try to do to anticipate where the puck is going, who's on the ice. I mean, sometimes, you fall behind in a play because, you don't know who's out there.
Yeah, and you can't see everything develop. Yeah.
Whistle blows. Sometimes one of the secrets you learn is you try to follow at least a few of the guys that are coming on and off the ice. Yeah. So you try to figure out, who's taking the face off for both teams. But if, they cut away from the ice, once the play stops, and then they come back about the time the puck drops, a line change has been made, but you feel like you've fallen behind because you're not sure who the 2 defensemen are up top. You're trying to just describe what you see, and unfortunately you become about 2 or 3 seconds behind at times. Because when you're at home, you're trying to, there are little tricks you can see when you can see the whole ice to try to anticipate where the play's going. So then you could feel like you're on top of things. And really, when you're watching the remote feed, sometimes it can be tough to anticipate things. Yeah,
man, your job's hard enough, and I think that just makes it harder. Like trying to keep track of that, and that's one of the questions. So, like I said, we opened this up for the people on Facebook and Instagram and said, hey, what questions do you have? And one of the questions, Nick Haynes asked if you plan on being back this season.
I plan on it, yeah. As long as the team wants me back, I'll be back.
And is Guy going to be back with you?
I'm not sure. He did an outstanding job this past year. I mean, he was just really a broadcast intern. He was a senior at the University of Utah this past year. I think he graduated last month. And as the season progressed, it was just kind of like, this guy's on top of things. He's prepared and knows information about both teams. And so I don't remember exactly when. It was probably mid-January. I figured I'd just have him call the game with me and him kind of being the game analyst. And he did an outstanding job. And, the few games he wasn't with me, he was over on the other side, preparing a demo tape. And I'm hoping somebody decides to hire him because I think he would do an outstanding job. The next to last regular season game, I gave him the second period, just have him do play-by-play, and he did an outstanding job. And so I'm hoping somebody hires him and gives him a big wad of cash and gives him an opportunity because I think he's certainly deserved it.
Well, that's awesome. That's fun, too, as like a mentor to watch people grow, and you give them a little – you see that they have potential, and you try to guide that potential, and then to actually see them succeed is always fun for you as a mentor, I bet.
And then think to yourself, this guy might be better than me.
That's the other part of radio is that sometimes you're training your replacement. And the fire department, they're like, hey, make sure that you train the next guy to take your job, which is fine but in radio, when you do that, they can literally just take your job when you weren't done with it yet. So it's always a scary thing. But what I was getting to before is going back to these questions and what you were talking about, like, for me, seeing you trying to broadcast on those flow feeds, which we tried to buy the rights to that. KSL wanted to stream all of the Grizzlies games, which I think we would have, I don't know, put more effort into it or whatever. But watching you try to do that, I started thinking, man, and this is actually one of the questions, is you've got all those names anyway, right? And hockey is notorious for just crazy last names. And then the other thing that people maybe do or do not realize is in the East Coast League, but I can hardly think of a night where the next night the lineup's the same. And then surely the next week, even if it's the same two teams, there's going to be 4 guys changed out on both rosters. So you got all these crazy names. You don't see who gets on the ice. So how do you keep track of all that? Do you go through the locker room and ask guys how do they pronounce their names, or ask their play-by-play guy, or how do you prepare for all those crazy names?
Usually with Grizzlies players, I'll ask them, after a morning skate or if I run into them, and there's a couple tricky ones, and there's like when we had Martin Wallette right before the pandemic, a goalie, it was just kind of like, you're saying it right, but you're not really sure. And when Dastu was here, it was just kind of like, I remember seeing that name and going, I hope he spends a whole year in the AHL, because I'm not sure that's give you a name that you can consistently pronounce. And I remember I asked him, Dastu, how do you say your name? And then he said it. And then I asked somebody else, like, go ask him how to say his name, because if he says the same thing to them, and it'd be like, okay, that's what we'll go with. And eventually, he turned out to be like the best defenseman the Grizzlies have ever had with his production. With the visiting team, oftentimes you'll just ask their broadcaster, how do you say some of the complicated names, like, Idaho had a defenseman, Demetrius Koumatsis, who played at Arizona State, and so that one was it wasn't necessarily how you thought it was pronounced. When you play a team like Idaho 26 times a year, luckily by game 20, it's second nature.
It's almost like a home game. Like, it's almost like your
almost
team.
Know Idaho as much as you know Utah. Sometimes you get those teams that you meet once or twice. So you just try to memorize as much as you can, and then just hope it turns out well. I mean, sometimes, you could spend the whole day, you could look at the roster, but then when game time comes around and 15's got the puck for the visiting team, and you realize, oh, wait a minute, I forgot who 15 is. For me, sometimes I have to just say the name a few times. During warm-ups, if the Grizzlies play a home game and we're playing a team that I'm not really familiar with, I'll spend the whole warm-up just looking at the visiting team warm up, watch the player skate, whether it's number 13, and then just kind of say, 13's name, 3 or 4 times, and then hope that it eventually sticks. Yeah. Luckily, over the years, it's become second nature. Right. Once they've said their name a few times, that just kind of finds a way to stick.
It's funny. I had a experience when my son was playing soccer, and I got asked to be in the locker or be in the broadcast booth and just do the PA announcing. And I did not realize that because I've got the German names down, Czech, Russian, Canadian, French Canadian, whatever, I could usually get it. But they are all Spanish last names, and I was slaughtering them. Absolutely. And the people were coming to the booth, they're like, no, you're saying it wrong. And I'm like, I'm doing the best I can. I give up. Like, I just couldn't. It's weird that I never realized that was my blind spot, because it's very rarely used in hockey, right? I was just slaughtering the names. Tell me about, like, the craziest times that you have had as far as being a broadcaster. Like, it's day-to-day. You go in, you have normal stuff, you prepare, but what's just a crazy experience that you've had so far as a broadcaster?
Boy, there's been quite a few of them. I remember the Brady DeVries game, being back at home and not really knowing the complete situation of Utah, just looking for any sort of goalie, anybody that can put pads on, anybody who owns pads in Rapid City. And I remember about noon asking Kanasowicz for the lineup, and he didn't know what it was yet. And it gets about 4 o'clock of that game day, and I figured I better call him just to figure out who's playing for us. So I call him up, and he's like, it's our goalie. You could tell he was not having a good day. Just like our goalie, I think, Brady DeVries is his name, and so I'm looking him up and going, hey, he's a 19-year-old freshman at Grand Canyon University. I thought this is going to be an adventure.
Yeah.
And then as the game goes on, you're just like, wait a minute. Grizzlies are hanging in there with this Rapid City team, and eventually, you get to overtime, and Trey Bradley scores a goal, and it's like, wait, they just won with an emergency goalie. You never met the guy, never met Brady DeVries, and it was kind of weird being on the road, the Grizzlies being on the road and being back. I was literally in an empty Mavericks Center trying to call the game and getting absolutely no help from Rapid City because they're trying to pretty much just
act like none of this is happening.
Yeah, they're just burying the whole thing. I never got a photo or video footage or any video highlights or anything of Brady DeVries. That was a crazy one. I remember in Allen, Texas, driving back from Allen to the airport in Dallas, and the bus that we're riding in, the door was open on the freeway the whole way. They couldn't close the door. So we're just sitting there, doors open. We're just slowly getting to the Dallas airport. Monday morning rush hour. There's a lot of travel things. I mean, the 2 years I did travel, there was a lot of crazy things, and being on the bus at 4 a.m. trying to get from one city to the other.
During a blizzard.
And even this past year, it's just every now and then just stuff happens. And you're just looking around going, have you ever seen that before? No, never have. You never know what pops up, but every year it's always something different. Yeah,
that's the thing. And you get a lot of that, too, especially, I don't know, it kind of brings the imagery of, like, Slapshot back where you're it's a budget league. We all know that there's not big money being spent, and you get buses are breaking down, and you're scrambling, and there's a lot of times where you're like, have you ever seen that? Nope.
Yeah, a great movie or a great TV series or even a great book could be written about just some of the crazy stuff that happens, especially that COVID impacted year where only half the teams in the league played, and it was games were random games are getting postponed, or you'd have a game where one team's got 13 guys dressed. It was kind of interesting seeing game 2 at the end of where the finals there where Florida had like 6 guys on the bench. It was kind of like every now and then in 2021 you just had a random game where it's just like, there's 5 guys in the ice and there's 6 on the bench. You just have to find a way to get through it.
It's so crazy to think about those times, and that was one of my questions, is just tell me about your experience with COVID. But from my perspective as the e-bug, and at first I'm like, well, it's over for me because they're not going to bring in some random firefighter. But the minute it got out, we got, as a first responders, we got vaccinated first, right? Maybe, and that's a whole nother topic. Anyway, as soon as it got out that I got vaccinated, I was on the bench every week. I got more time. I thought I was going to get 0 time, and I got more time during COVID than I did in probably the 3 years previous.
Everybody needed a goalie.
Yeah, everybody needed a goalie, and nobody could travel, and things just got really weird. So, yeah, I was spending a ton of time.
Good thing you weren't in Rapid City that one night. You probably would have been in net.
And Kanasowicz called, and he's like, I was on shift at the fire department, or I would have gone because I would have flown out for that. And he's like, can you come out? You'll probably play. And to me, that sounds like a good time. And the last time I played was against Rapid City, so I was like, I'll do that again. But I couldn't get it there. They tried to get my son out there. They were just scrambling so hard.
And the guy they ended up going with was just on a Christmas vacation. He lived in Rapid City.
Yeah, we had him on the show right after that, and just listening to his story. And can you imagine? They put you in the net one time, didn't they? Have you put on the pads?
I don't think I have. I mean, there's been some other, like the assistant equipment manager Jackson went out there in the pads.
Yeah, he was a goalie. So,
I mean, I think he was one of the options. Like, if they couldn't find DeVries, I think Jackson did travel that year. It probably would have been him in net.
Honestly, he probably. Well, I know that the other kid won, but Jackson's actually a pretty good goalie.
Chris Shornack, old equipment manager. I think he's an assistant equipment manager of the LA Kings.
Yeah,
I think he was a goalie at Adrian.
Yeah, actually, I was harassing him last night. He's helping me order some gear. Great guy. But what I was getting to is that, like, it's hard enough to be a goalie at that level with everything you have custom fit, custom made, ready to go. And that Brady kid had to borrow somebody else's complete equipment, skates and everything. And that's so awkward. And then to make that your pro debut, plus not being I think he'd only played like 1 or 2 college games at that point.
It was 2, maybe 3 games at Grand Canyon University.
Grand Canyon, and they had 2 teams. Because it's club, I think they had D1 and D2, and he was on the D2 team. So he was not prepped and ready to go, and he did an amazing job. Like that's the thing everybody dreams about, right? Like, oh, I'm in the stands. This is what I do. What if the coach points up and he's like, we need you? And would you be ready to go? And I can't imagine with somebody else's gear. It's just got to be tough.
Yeah, just especially if it doesn't fit.
Yeah. And the odds are, and especially because, again, everything's so adjustable on the goalie equipment now. So you may wear a large and I wear a large, but if you put my large on, my elbows are going to be in a different place, my wrist cuffs are going to be in a different place, my back floater, my chest floater, like all that stuff's going to be adjusted to how I move. And now you're in it, and it's so complicated and changes everything. And if you have any claustrophobia in you at all, you'll find it when you're in goalie equipment because, man, it messes with you. So what else during COVID how did you make it work? Is that just your introduction to solo broadcasting from like an empty room?
Yeah, pretty much. You're just trying to find a way to make it work. I remember the first game. I don't even know if it did work. The first road game in Rapid City. Because it was all new. Previously you'd just gone to all the road games, been able to see it, and so when a goal gets scored and the camera really didn't give you a good angle as to who scored or whether it got tipped. Yeah. And then some of those places, they won't show you a replay because they don't want to show any replays of the visiting team scoring. So then that becomes a thing, or the first time your screen freezes, and by the time you reload the page, oh wait a minute, score's now 2-1. What happened? What happened? Somebody scored a goal. That was something where you find a way to just. And sometimes you just have to say, hey, we didn't see it.
Yeah, and I think people back in the day, I would say even 5 years ago, that would have been unacceptable, right? But now you're just like, look, this is where we're at. This is what's happening. Like, I'm streaming, you're streaming. We missed it. Sorry. Like, we're doing the best we can. We're doing everything we can.
Yeah. It's always tough when, you want to do a good job and you want to put together something that you feel like sounds like an NHL level kind of broadcast, but yet there are times where you're just like, hey, there was one in Wichita, in March where the Grizzlies scored like 3 goals in a 2-minute stretch, but I didn't see the third one because my screen froze because we were having some internet issues, and so it's just like, well, 3-2, Grizzlies now lead 3-0. I figured it was probably my internet, it wasn't everybody else's, so we had a live chat on YouTube, so it's just kind of like, well, if you saw the goal, can you, in the description, tell us how we scored. Tell us how we scored.
Yeah. That's smart.
But I was looking for a fish story. I was looking for, the guy jumped over 2 people and then did a cartwheel, and I didn't actually want a real description as to how the goal got scored. I wanted a fish story, really. I wanted
somebody to be creative with it. Yeah, that's funny. All right, so one of the other questions is the Rooster going to be back?
Well, I hope so. I think, if he's in this league, I think Kanasowicz would certainly like to have him back. I mean, Jordan Martell, that was probably the trade of the year that Kanasowicz made. He acquired Jordan Martell for Neil Robinson, and, Martell had picked up, I think, 6 assists in 13 games with Fort Wayne, but he just was having a tough time scoring goals, and Kanasowicz picked him up, and there were games where he looked like the best forward on the ice.
Oh.
There were many games where it just seemed like he, not only made an impact scoring, but even the games where he wasn't scoring, it felt like he was still getting 3 or 4 good scoring chances. And he really gave the Grizzlies a big boost. And you think about the last week of the regular season where he won the league's Player of the Week award. I mean, the Grizzlies probably don't make the playoffs if he doesn't have the kind of week that he did against Tolson. So I think Kanasowicz would like to have him back, and I think that there will be a roster spot for the Rooster if he's going to be in this league.
Now looking back, it's crazy to me. So one thing, 2 years ago was an amazing year with Dastu and Manic and Trent Miner just basically coming out of nowhere and setting the shutout record. And you had all these things just clicking and just being around the team. And I know I get a little better look than most people because not only am I a fan, but I get to go in and practice with the guys every once in a while. And to walk into a locker room like that with that much positive energy, it's that's hard to find, first off. And I've talked to Kanaswich about it quite a bit. But it just seemed like that team was destined to do good things. This year was really good. Barely made the playoffs. Like you said, it was a last-week push. We had to win those last 3 games, I think.
I had to win all 3 of them based on how it turned out.
And then to think, because Idaho and Florida are in the final right now. Did they play last night? I think they did, right?
I know Florida's up 2-0.
Okay.
I don't know if they've played great game 3 just yet.
Okay. I knew they were up, but just the fact that Idaho is in the final, and we were literally 2 goals away from, we lost 4 games in overtime in a row after going up 2-0 on a team that just set the record for wins or points during a season. And to lose 4 in a row to Idaho, all in overtime, was unheard of. It's like a Disney movie, backwards, like if you're watching it from the Idaho standpoint, because that was pretty crazy. But to think, that team that gelled right at that last moment, that's good coaching. That's creative coaching on Kanaswich's part, because he was building. He made some moves that maybe didn't make sense at the time, but then once play went on, it was obvious why he did it. But to be 2 goals away from advancing from the first round with that team, that's pretty impressive. What did you think about that last push?
Well, it felt like the team that was in the playoffs wasn't necessarily the one we saw in January, and because of that, everybody looked at the standings and went, "Oh, Idaho's 40-some odd regular season standings points ahead of Utah," but it didn't really feel like it. It didn't feel like the margin, the difference between Utah and Idaho was that much. Picking up Kyle Mayhew and Luke Martin and some of the forwards, Kyle Betts coming over from the AHL. He spent just about the whole year in the AHL, came back here, and he looked like he was at a different speed. And then, guys just getting better as the season went on. Cameron Wright had an outstanding year, and it just seemed like the team just finally found its way from about mid-February on. And so, it was interesting going into that playoff series. Everybody in the locker room, they didn't care about what Idaho's regular season record was. They felt like they were going to win. Yeah. There wasn't a, hey, let's give them a good push. They were looking to win. They were expecting to win. And first 2 games in Idaho went exactly the way Utah wanted. Game 3, was kind of back and forth, and I guess you tip your hat to Idaho because they found a way to win those games. I know that from the Grizzlies' perspective, it was definitely frustrating once you started seeing the 3rd overtime loss, and then obviously Game 6 in Boise, because it felt like they were just right there. Yeah. It was theirs for the taking. I think that you spend the whole offseason trying to figure out what's that little 5% extra that can get them over the hump. What's really the difference? To where you end up winning those overtime games as opposed to losing them. And I think for me it was kind of weird because it was the second time I've seen that same scenario. In 2019, the Grizzlies won Game 1 in a blowout in the first round to Idaho, and then lost 4 straight overtime games. And so for me, I had those nightmares of 2019 all over again, thinking, we're right there. We never lost a single regulation game in the series, and yet they're going home. And considering where Idaho is now in the finals, almost feels like, if Utah could just found a way to sneak 1 or 2, 2 more goals. Could it be the Grizzlies in the finals? I think that's
what I wonder. It's tough, and you talk about that 5% or the X factor or whatever. And I coached a couple kids a long time ago. Well, it wasn't that long ago, but I coached these guys that they're brothers, Jamal and Jaden Eckett. They brought such a positive energy to the locker room, and I'd be like, all right, we're going to do this drill. And man, they'd get fired up about doing the drill. Or I'm like, all right, we're going to do a battle drill out of the corner. Who's up? Because you got to have a couple guys go in the corner first and battle it out and work on those techniques. And those guys would always just get up. I'm up, and they're excited about it. They got the rest of the team excited about it. They're excited about those hard drills. They're excited about practice. They're excited about long bus trips to wherever, that kind of stuff. And I think the Grizzlies had that the last couple of years. I know that that Dastu was just an amazingly positive influence in that locker room. Manic was also, those are the 2 that were up every drill. First up, what is it? I don't care how hard it is. I want to do it. I want to do it hard. I want to be first. And I think finding guys like that is at 5%. I just wonder, obviously having Dastu, who's one of the best that's played here in a long time, Manic, who's a hometown kid, and obviously I'm totally biased, but helped raise that kid since he's a pup. But just seeing guys like that, I hope we find something else to replace those guys. As far as energy, you're never going to find that skill. I mean, that's so hard to get to stay in this league. Like a guy that good almost always gets pulled up to the A, like Dastard.
Yeah, well, it's just like you always know that any team coached by Ryan Kanaswich, there's going to be a speed element to it. He's going to want a fast team, and I think the one thing in the offseason that's possible that Kanaswich could be looking at is maybe a little bit more size, because it seems like every team that plays against the Grizzlies is going to want to play physical against them, because they figure, okay, well, Grizzlies are faster than we are, so how are we going to find a way to combat them? So it would just play a very strong physical game, and so I know the Grizzlies are probably going to be looking for that in the offseason. It's kind of interesting when you think about what the great teams have. It just seems like with Idaho, when they absolutely had to have it, they just, for whatever reason, it just seemed like they always were in control. They always found a way to win those 50-50 battles. They always found a way to control the puck. They always seemed to control the pace of the game. I know that Florida, the times I've seen the Florida Everblades, it's been a similar case. And Florida, obviously, a couple wins away from repeating as champs. Even if you look at the NHL level, the teams that just seem to control the pace of play, it seemed like Vegas here in the first two games of the finals, seems to have controlled the pace against Florida.
Oh, yeah.
I know for the Grizzlies, when they've had success against Idaho, it was especially the first two games of that playoff series, it seemed like Utah was in control of the pace of the game. It seemed like they were, and that's really what the great teams have. And I think that it starts with a strong blue line, strong defensive unit, and I think for Utah, I think that the tough thing is knowing that they're right there. It's kind of tough thinking, this upcoming October having to start from scratch, but it'll be interesting to see, because I think Ryan Kanaswich has got the system. He's really got the perfect temperament to be a coach in this league, because he just seems like he's got that even keel, and he also seems to have that perfect balance of when to get on a team, when to kick him in the butt, and when to pat him on the back. He seems to just be right on the he just seems to press the right buttons in terms of when to get the team going, when to give a strong motivational speech, and when the team needs a pat on the back and some encouragement.
Yeah, he definitely gets it. Speaking of starting from scratch, you've seen some things. There's already been movement in the Avalanche. Obviously, we just lost the assistant coach, or the coach of the Eagles, right?
Yeah, Greg Cronin, who became the Anaheim Ducks coach.
Yeah, and that's you look at that and the potential of who can move where. You think that means Tim Branham moves up into that spot? Makes sense.
It could be him, if they want to go internally. Obviously, with an AHL job, it really depends on who's making the hire. Is it going to be the Eagles solely making that decision, or is it is the NHL team
Joe
going to have
Sakic going to tell them who's going to be their coach?
Sakic's going to have an influence, obviously, if you're an NHL team, you want to be on the same page with your AHL affiliate, especially if you're going to have handful of guys that are going to be playing for your team at any point in the season. I mean, Brandon, I think, would do a great job there with Colorado, but I know their other assistant, Aaron Schneethcloth, was their head coach when they won a couple Kelly Cups, in 2017 and 2018. So I think he'd be a pretty good candidate as well. If they go outside the organization, I could see them going for a guy that's got a lot of experience, as Greg Cronin had, 12 years of NHL assistant experience before he became the Eagles head coach. You could end up seeing a guy that, spent a lot of time as an NHL assistant and, just kind of looking for a head coaching spot in the AHL that, could boost his resume.
Right.
So I think the Eagles could go in any number of directions there with their head coaching spot.
And that does well, and one way or another, there's going to be some movement up there, and I think Kanaswich is kind of, I don't know that he's even wanting to move, but looks like there's an opportunity for somebody else to move. And speaking of that, the Avalanche have also made, some goalies have left their organization. They've drafted some more, but you think a guy like Trent Miner, with the back-to-back seasons that he's had here, there's no way he comes back. Do you think? I mean, he's got to be an AHL goalie next year.
I think he's got to be an AHL goalie next year, especially since next year will be the last year of a 3-year NHL entry-level deal.
Yeah.
I was a little bit surprised to see him this past year after 7 shutouts. And it seems like when he's got his A game on, nobody can score against him.
Oh.
You think about how he ended the regular season with a shutout against Tulsa, and then that first playoff game. I mean, Idaho had one great chance after another, and they just couldn't get anything past him.
Right.
He's definitely an AHL level goalie, and you give it a couple years. I mean,
he's only like 22, right? 21, 22?
2021, maybe 22. I mean, I think he's got some NHL potential, especially with his work ethic. It's not necessarily he's got the skill and the quickness, and seems like he is a very smart guy, but his work ethic, that's one of the things that stands out about him, and really a lot of good goalies is just that work ethic, to just the preparation.
Yep.
He seems to be a guy that's well prepared and very smart guy, and that's I think why Garrett Metcalf has been able to have a lot of success as a pro is his work ethic. And what really impresses me about Garrett Metcalf is he could sit on the bench for a couple months, practice, and then you get your chance to play, and he could sit out for a month, not playing any games, come in, and first game in there, looks like he's played every game. He's right there in rhythm. For goalies, it seems like every pro's got everyone's got talent, but the ones that seem to end up making it at those levels are the guys that just seem to prepare and have that work ethic.
Garrett's hasn't always really impressed me. Like when he was younger, he didn't have it, and then at some point he just got it, and he really started preparing physically. But like you say, and I feel bad about the situation he's in here with Utah because we all want to see him play. We know he can play at this level, but he's not. The Avalanche didn't sign him. The Grizzlies did, so the Avalanche are going to want their guys played first. But when he does get put in, to have that mental balance and to be prepared mentally is way harder than to be prepared physically. And that's the part that people don't get. Like, yeah, you didn't play for 2 months. Now go in. If you do great, you did great. If you don't do well, you're probably done. Like, it's, you know what I mean? Like, you're day-to-day, and you have to be prepared to play.
It's tough in this league because you pretty much have to keep 3 goalies because at any point, you could lose 1, maybe 2 goalies to affiliates.
Yeah.
And so you need that third goalie that's got an ECHL contract that, might play once a month, but that, when you put him in there that once, 1 or 2 games a month, you hope that they're prepared and they're ready to go. And Garrett Metcalf's done an outstanding job with that. And the interesting thing when you got an ECHL contract is you're essentially an AHL free agent, and I think Garrett ended up playing more AHL games this year than Trent Miner did.
Yeah, I think you're right, and that does not blow your mind because Miner's getting all the games down here. He's game ready, and he'd get pulled up and he'd sit on the bench. And then Garrett would get pulled up and get thrown in some games. He did really well for San Diego. I think he only played, 2 or 3 games?
I think he got in 5 games.
Oh, yeah,
I think 2 of the games are really
him.
well. I mean, yeah. San Diego really struggled this past year.
Yeah, they were brutal. They were on like an 8 or 10 game losing streak when he got there, and I think he got their first win in a long time.
Yeah, a couple of the games, hard to say that they're his fault because the team around him. He had a couple of games where he let in quite a few goals. But
if you have a 10-game losing streak going, it's not the goalie's fault. It's the team.
Kind of
the whole team. Yeah,
it's kind of the benefit of having an ECHL contract is any AHL team could pull you up.
Yeah.
Where I've seen some really good players that have got an AHL deal. They play really well for the Grizzlies, but they're kind of at the mercy of the Eagles calling them up. And if the Eagles don't have a spot for a forward or a defenseman, they're in Utah, and they're going to be in Utah until an injury arrives in Colorado.
Yeah.
Whereas they know that if they had an ECHL contract with the same production, they know somebody's picking them up. It's kind of like that flexibility with Brandon Cutler. He ended up getting picked up by 3 different AHL teams this year.
Yeah.
And then when he came back here, you could tell why. He had spent some time in the AHL because he just did all the little things. Win the battles on the boards, win the 50-50 pucks. Just kind of play a blue-collar game. To add along with the skill that he can score goals at this level. It's kind of interesting as you think about that AHL contract, but if you continue to produce at an ECHL level, eventually somebody's going to take note and pick you up.
Yeah, you see guys now doing the math. They'll be like, hey, all right, I have this offer and this offer, but if I go here, they've got 4 teams or 4 guys in my position in front of me there are 8 guys with NHL experience in this organization that play my position, or they just start looking for where where do I have the best chance to play, and where do I have the best chance to climb up out of the East Coast League?
It's kind of like the Grizzlies. They had a bunch of great defensemen there for that 2022 Western Conference Final team because they were just the Eagles were just stacked with defensemen.
Yeah,
and it was like the Eagles. It was like all three levels there had the defenseman of the year in 2022. The NHL had McCarr, and then there was an AHL guy with the Eagles that was defenseman of the year. Then Dastu, obviously, at the ECHL level.
Yeah, super surprised to me that Dastu didn't get signed by the Avalanche, at least for an AHL deal. I was really surprised by that.
You must have gotten a pretty good deal with Kuku in Finland, though. It must be a pretty good deal that he got there.
I heard a number, and it was pretty good.
One of those you'd have to be an idiot to turn down that offer.
I don't have anything to back this up except for I was told that he was making more over there than he would have made if he got pulled up to the NHL on a base level. So
I don't know if it's been announced, but I think there's another former Grizzly that's going to be joining him in Finland.
Okay. Are you going to announce it right here or no?
I think Ben Tardif's going to join him in Finland.
Oh, really? Good for him.
That was kind of an interesting deal last year because it was like Ben Tardif was over in the AHL with the Colorado Eagles, and I think at some point, Kanaswich was expecting to get him back, and then he gets traded for Luke Martin.
Right.
Martin ends up spending some time in the AHL, but then finished up the season with the Grizzlies. And so that was kind of an interesting deal with two guys who are both, all-league rookie members in 2022 getting traded for each other in an AHL deal.
Yeah.
Every now and then you'll see like an NHL deal being made, and it involves a Grizzlies player. A couple years ago, Josh Dickinson gets traded from the Avalanche organization over to Chicago, and then end up facing him in the playoffs a year later. I remember Kenton Helgeson, who was with Rapid City the last couple years. He was with the Grizzlies on an NHL deal with Anaheim, and got pulled away in a deal. Those are kind of interesting ones that you don't make the trade, but it's just kind of like, well, the NHL affiliate made the trade for you. And
you don't make the trade, but it was your guy.
All of a sudden, you lose a forward.
Yep. Yeah, it's the life of the affiliate, right? It's the ups and downs, and that's the craziest thing. We've had Kanaswich on here a few times, and just to watch him try to put the puzzle back together, it's like it reminds me a little bit of when I was playing juniors in Canada. We try to play Risk. And you have all your pieces on the board, and you're finally getting some momentum, and then you hit a bump in the freeway or whatever, and now you got to go, oh, man, I need to get this and this and that. Now I got to figure out where everything went. How do we get all these pieces back where they belong? And to me, that's like you have 1,000 pieces on the board. That's basically what it comes down to being an East Coast League coach, because you need 20 plus 2 goalies or 3 goalies or 4 goalies, maybe 6. Who knows? You need to have tabs on everything. You hit that bump in the road where all of a sudden – a bunch of your pieces are either with the Eagles or the Avalanche or with the goals or whatever. Now you got to put it all back together and figure it out.
It's like a few times a year, it's just like, okay, we're really deep at forward. And all of a sudden you got really good players that have to sit out because you can only play so many guys.
Yeah.
And there are times where it's just like, hey, we got like 8 healthy forwards. What are we going to do? We have to bring a couple defensemen, move them up to forward. And it happens like 4 times a year where it's just like you're really deep at one spot. Now you need somebody at that spot.
Yeah, it's so crazy. And people don't get it. Like it's just I wish people could see that part of it because it's such a cool behind the scenes part. And they're like, oh yeah, well, Kanaswich goes out there and runs practice, and then his day's over. No, he's on the phone. He's constantly on the computer watching guys or looking for stats, or you have to just keep your finger on the pulse of everything. You got to be watching what's going on with major, junior, NCAA, who's a free agent from a team that you just played. Like if something just happened last night in an Avalanche game, how's it going to affect your life? And that's every day for Kanaswich.
Over the last couple of years, he's done an outstanding job there in the month of March at getting guys from colleges and junior leagues. Over the last couple of years, some of Utah's best players, James Shearer and Dakota Raby. You bring them up Johnny Walker. This past year, Kyle Mayhew from the University of Denver. I think he's going to be an outstanding defenseman.
Right.
With his size, unfortunately, he's probably going to be at in this league and at this level. If the Grizzlies bring him back, he's going to be an outstanding defenseman. He was probably Utah's best defenseman during that playoff series against Idaho. The only thing, he's probably 5'7" or 5'8", so he just doesn't have the size. Yeah, but then you think about guys like James Shearer, may not score a ton of goals, but they do literally everything else. They're always in the right place at the right time. I mean, really, that's where the Grizzlies almost caught up to Idaho last year in terms of talent. Was just month of March, Kanasowicz was able to get 4 or 5 pieces that really turned it from a good team to potentially a great team. And that's what made this past playoff run so much fun and gave the Grizzlies a lot of potential there in the playoffs. The fact that he was able to make that 4 or 5 key moves, getting those junior league guys. And most of the times those players end up coming back the next season.
Right. You hope they do, yeah. It's cool, and that's, like you said, Kanasowicz has done an amazing job at it. I think that's, to me, nowadays, that's the most fun part to watch. It's just watching who's coming from where and watching in the whole league. I like watching them pick up guys and give guys a chance. It's just kind of exciting to see it happen.
See those key trades, and a guy who may be on a third line somewhere else as a forward, you give him a chance, and a guy like Jordan Martell just makes the most of it.
Right. Well, that's how the whole Vegas Knights team was built, right? Guys that weren't protected by their other team and were second or third line, wherever they were, and now they're one of the best in the NHL.
Yep. First year make the finals. I mean, the Kraken, their second year of existence, put together a pretty good run. Kind of wonder if we're going to get a team here at some point.
Yeah, what do you think about that? What are the rumors you're hearing? I maybe wasn't going to bring it up this time, but man, it's such a hot button issue right now.
I think that there's a couple things working in Salt Lake's favor. One, it seems like every prospective team needs that multi-billionaire that's got ambition.
Oh.
It looks like we've got that in Ryan Smith. You talk about a guy that has the Jazz, and it's kind of weird that he's going after the Grizzlies or going after an NHL team, considering that they play the same time of year as the NBA.
Right.
And he probably also has to think about, where's that team going to play?
Oh.
It's almost like the top 2 issues when you're building a team or trying to come up with a franchise is, one, who's that ambitious multi-billionaire? Well, check that box off. But where are they going to play long term? I think that they'd almost have to consider building an arena specific for hockey, especially if the Olympics end up coming to town. I think that could end up being a big boost. If they get the Olympics, you could build another place. You can kind of utilize an Olympic Maverick. I mean, that's why it exists. It's got that 2002 Olympics and, some other buildings there. I mean, I live literally across the street from the Olympic Oval in Kearns.
Oh,
yeah. So I could see the Olympics, if they come to town, maybe helping with that, and getting a hockey-specific arena, because I think you can play there at Delta Center short term, but long term they probably are going to have to find an answer. Yeah,
I think you could too, and I think that's part of his pitch, right? He's like, hey, I already have a building, and we could be playing in it tomorrow. I already have ice, I already have boards. I've said that part of the show before too. He also could buy the Maverick Center.
Yeah.
I mean, and maybe that's not big enough. What does the Maverick Center hold for hockey?
Probably about 10,000.
I thought it was like 14,000. Is it 10,000?
Yeah.
All right, so that's not going to be big enough. That's barely bigger than. I mean, that's double what they're playing. What Arizona's playing now.
It's double the Arizona size.
And that was my understanding. Again, I don't have anything to back this up. My son, some of his friends, they worked for Real Salt Lake, part of Ryan Smith's group. Part of the group that owns Real Salt Lake also owns the Rangers and the Devils. And at some point, they all got together and they're like, hey, Phoenix is in trouble. They're playing in front of a 5,000-seat arena. Even if you took out the bad sight lines at the Delta Center, it's still going to hold more than 5,000 people. It'd probably be closer to, I don't know, 14, 18, 16 maybe. I'll have to look that up. But, I mean, they could do it right now. And that's what he did. He's like, hey, we could do it right now. And the NHL, I have the money, I have a building, I have enough money to buy another building or create another building or whatever. So that's got to boost us up out of all the other cities.
I think so. I mean, Atlanta's looking like they're making a pitch, but they've had the NHL twice and lost it. Houston's probably trying to make a pitch. They've got the arena there that the Houston Rockets play in that they probably figure we could play hockey there as soon as next year. I mean, they got some history at the Houston Aeros, but this would be a perfect landing spot for the Coyotes, and I think we've got enough fans that I think we can fill the place, and I think the excitement would be there. I mean,
well, when you look at it, and this is one of the arguments, people are like, well, there's not enough people to even go to the Grizzlies games. Yeah, well, there weren't a lot of people going to Vegas Wranglers games either. But now try to get a ticket to a Knights game. those buildings are sold out. You can get secondhand tickets, but it's going to cost you.
Especially first time the Detroit Red Wings come to town, or the Blackhawks, or the Avalanche, or Ovechkin and the Capitals.
Yeah, the Leafs.
Sidney Crosby comes to town. I mean, everybody's going to be excited to see that, especially the first few years, which is why I think the NHL would do well and would be supported with a big enough fan base, and why I think Major League Baseball would also do pretty well in this market as well.
Right. It's funny about that, too, because while I was in a meeting and they're like, hey, the Miller Group and the Smith Group are going after the Anaheim Angels to bring them here. I'm like, oh, okay. And then all we ever talk about is expansion. I'm like, what happened to us? I thought we made an offer. So I think there's something else going on. Like, I think they have more. Obviously, they know more than we know, but it seems like those groups have almost like secured money, secured a site, and have a reasonable expectation that those teams will be here within the next 2 or 3 years.
It looked like the Angels were for sale, and then the owner decided he wasn't going to sell. He was just going to keep the franchise. Now, whether he changed his mind the next few years, I mean, who knows? But obviously he's got a big market in Anaheim, but he's got a ballpark that's aging a little bit. I mean, they redid the thing in the mid-'90s, but you could build a new ballpark here, and I think the Angels would be a good fit here because they've already got a foothold here with the Bees. I mean, they've been their affiliate since 2001. Expansion would be kind of tough because it hasn't happened since 1998.
Right.
And I think Salt Lake's best case is if they decide to go one team west and one team out east. Out east, it probably goes to Nashville, is putting together a pretty good case for a team. And Salt Lake would probably just have to compete with Portland, maybe Vancouver, Sacramento, if they really wanted to jump in, probably could. But if it's just for that team out west, I think Salt Lake has a pretty good case. And it sounds like with Portland, they don't politically have all their ducks in a row, whereas it seems like politically everything's kind of in line here for that baseball pursuit.
Yeah, I hope so. All right, man. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming out. I enjoy listening to you on the radio or streaming or whatever we call it these days.
Who knows what it is anymore?
I do though. Like I'll pull up YouTube and I want to listen to the game, especially those last 3 games, man. And I'll throw it up and then I'll put YouTube on and I'll put my phone down and then I'll drive and then my phone, if I drive past a fire station, this is what I noticed because on my way home, if I drive past a fire station, my phone syncs to the Wi-Fi, and then as I pull away, I lose my signal. And then I'm frozen for a minute. Like you talk about, I keep freezing. If I pull out of my driveway, by the time I get to the road, I freeze up, and then I have to pull over, start it over again. So that part kind of sucks, but it's nice that it's there. I hope there's something else besides YouTube. Or
hope so.
Yeah. Well, we'll figure it out. Whatever it is, we're going to keep listening because we want to know what happens with the Grizzlies. They're so much fun to watch, and I'm excited to see what happens with the team this year. I hope Miner's in the A. It sucks for us. But that kid doesn't belong here.
Yeah.
That kid's going to be somewhere. And I'd like to see Garrett be our starting goalie. I know that has nothing to do with what I want. But I'd like to see him get a chance. And I also don't think he's an East Coast League goalie. I think he's better than that. I think he's bigger. Like, size-wise, he's what the AHL and NHL are looking for. So hopefully he gets that opportunity this year. And I hope it's here in front of his hometown fans, in front of his dad. If not, whatever. But it's been fun to watch him play. What are you looking forward to this upcoming season?
I think for the Grizzlies, they're just trying to find a way to take that next step. And I think they've got a good foundation in place, especially Ryan Knaus, which is back for another year. I think they're looking for – it was just kind of a weird year with their affiliate because it just seemed like there were so many injuries with the Avalanche and Eagles that, unfortunately, the Grizzlies weren't able to get nearly as much help as they did the previous year from Colorado. I expect this year that the Grizzlies are going to get a ton of help from their affiliate this season, and that really sets them up for success. Obviously, you never know about the twists and turns that go on within a season, but it feels like there's a ton of optimism for the Grizzlies going into next year. I mean, the schedule looks like it's kind of has a lot of home games early in the season. Looks like the first 7 games will be at home. I could see the Grizzlies getting off to a fast start next year, and I think that they're just looking for that extra 5% to get them over the hump, and I think they're trying to figure out what that is. And I think that there's a lot of optimism that the Grizzlies are going to be pretty strong next season.
That's awesome. What's your goal? Where do you want to end up? You want to go to the NHL too?
Yeah, that's.
Is it the NHL or would it be Major League Baseball?
I think it's any of the major sports.
Sport?
Either the NBA, Major League Baseball. I mean, the NFL is kind of more of a pipe dream than any of the others.
Would that be Would that be the pinnacle for you? Is the NFL?
It'd be fun. I always thought that one was kind of a tougher one to attain because it just seems like everybody wants to be in the NHL.
We're just fantasizing here. We're just fantasizing. If you could end up anywhere, where would you want to end up?
Well, considering the fact that I'm single and I have nobody that seems to want to hang out with me, Major League Baseball is perfect because it occupies a ton of time for a 6-month period. That's right.
Good Lord. Yeah.
The tough thing is sometimes, if you have a wife and kids, sometimes you just kind of have to do what you have to do. Unfortunately for me, since I can't find anybody, it's just like need something to occupy time. That's pretty much been my dreams to just end up in one of those 4 major sports.
Yeah.
Just ever since I was growing up listening to Hot Rod Hundley, it's just something I've always wanted to do. And
I got to meet him quite a bit, like years ago. He lived in the running district, and it was just cool because I grew up listening to him too, and he's just an amazing person, and it was good to see him quite a bit and get to know him a little bit. Well, man, I hope for you, I think you deserve it. I think you've earned it. You're so much fun to listen to, and you can tell you do all the work. And so I'd love, if we get a Major League Baseball team, I'd love to see you end up there. I think that'd be ideal for all of us. I think it'd be fun to listen to you in your realm. You do an amazing job for the Grizzlies, and I appreciate it as a fan. So, again, thanks for coming on the show. Is there anything else you want to add before we end the show?
It was just great to be here. It's just it's one of those I've seen other people on the show, and I thought it'd be kind of fun to be on here sometime.
Yeah, and I've always my plan was always to have you on, and things just the hardest thing with us is when getting hit by COVID. I thought it would end the show, especially when they're like, "Oh, the KSL is like, hey, listen, we got people in the building that actually need to be in the building and that make the company a lot of money, and since you're a firefighter and you're out exposed to COVID all the time, how about you just don't come to work for a little while? Can you do this little thing from your home?" So then I'm like, all right, well, that gets a little weird. And then right as we get back going again, they're like, hey, podcasts are doing really well. We're going to rebuild the entire studio. So now you're back in your house. So it's like, man, I went from being like a twice-a-week podcast to just like once-a-week podcast. So it made it weird, and it made me push my guest list back. But you've always been on there. And again, like I said, I'm a fan of yours, and it's been fun to have you on.
Yeah, it's been great. It's great being here.
Well, now you got to have me on your show. Now you got to have me come. I'll come drop some knowledge, and if I don't know it, I'll just make it up. If you want me, I'll do some color commentating.
You're invited anytime.
Make fun of Kanasowicz and Pike, and
you're invited anytime.
All right, man. I'm always around. And I love to talk about hockey. So
it was great to be here in Sandy. I think Pike's from Sandy too. I don't know which part of Sandy.
Yeah, around here, I think. I'm new to this. I've only lived in this area for a year. So for the listeners, I'm doing this podcast in my living room with, I don't know, $10,000 worth of equipment. That's it's nice to make my studio at home as nice as the studio at the radio station, but it's not bad.
It's a great setup.
Oh yeah, they're like, you have a terabyte in here. There's a bunch more of this in my back bedroom, but I have more music in here than all the radio stations I used to work for. It's crazy what you can do from home nowadays. But anyway, again, Grizzlies start. When's the first game?
I think October 21st. I think it's that third Saturday in October. They'll host the Tulsa Oilers.
Nice. And I looked over the roster. It didn't look like as many games against Idaho this year.
14 instead of 18. They're spread out quite a bit, which is nice.
Better seeing it spread out.
First half of last year is like played them 15 times, and of course they turned out to be an historically good regular season team. Which halfway through the season, I thought we can make a pretty good second half push because you don't have to play Idaho so much.
Yeah, no kidding. It's funny though because they only had 11 losses, I think, during the regular season.
Yeah.
But a few of them were the Grizz. The Grizz seem to have their number a little bit.
On the road even a few times.
Yeah. All right, well, that's it for today, Tyson. Thanks so much for being on. We're looking forward to this upcoming season and listening to everything that you can come up with on the radio.
We'll try to come up with as much as we can. Luckily, it's until October, play plenty of golf and try to work on their swing a little bit. Yeah,
get out there. We'll have to get out there together. I go golfing with Kanasowicz every once in a while.
He's a good player.
Yeah, I'll have to tell you, me and him and Tim back in the day would go out, and Tim and I'm never on the right fairway. I'm always out making friends with somebody else because my ball's in the wrong place or putting someone in the houses near us. But Yeah, we'll have to all go out together. It'll be fun.
That'd be a lot of fun.
All right, that is the Utah Puck Report. If you haven't subscribed already, please do. Let's keep this building and making sure that everybody knows that Utah is actually a hockey state, and that is the end of the Utah Puck Report.